Let's talk some Ole Miss recruiting coming off that historic 28-10 beatdown last night of Georgia. This was one for the record books. We got Zach Berry. This is going to be a really cool video. Zach Berry is currently at the Manning Center on campus, right across the street from the stadium. He's about to interview the recruits leaving campus, but we got him. So before we get going, do me a favor right now, Ole Miss fans. Jump on board. We're talking Rebel recruiting. Hit subscribe for me to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. We want you guys to be a part of it. All right, let's bring in Zach Berry on site from OM Spirit, about to talk to some of these big-time recruits. We're going to get into it, but last night, what was that recruit experience here? We got some video, actually, of Deuce Knight storming the field with all the other fans. What was the atmosphere post-game for these recruits?
Yeah, being on the field in the fourth quarter, you could see most of the recruits that were down there. They were excited. They were ready to storm the field. Talked to some guys afterwards, talked to some guys this morning. A lot of them have never experienced anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
First storm, field storm experience for a lot of these guys. And it just that kind of atmosphere, that kind of weekend hit all the notes for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss when you're bringing in the biggest visitor list you brought in all season. It's your last big home game, and it just couldn't have been a more perfect environment. Even with the rain, I thought that the crowd was tremendous the entire game. I told somebody this morning, I don't think anyone was sitting down the entire game. It was loud. The recruits were loving it. You could see them in the recruit section, and those guys were all standing up. I mean, it was kind of, I was worried early Saturday that the rain might scare some people off, or the rain might scare some recruits off. They don't want to go sit out there, but they were dialed in from pregame to storming the field. So it was, if you're Lane Kiffin and Kelvin Bolden and Alex Collins and Alex Brown and Billy Glasscock, I mean, that whole recruiting staff, they have to just, that coffee tasted a little bit better this morning.
Hey, they were buzzing last night. I don't know what was going on necessarily. We're going to get into some of these big name recruits that were on campus, but I saw a lot of Sharks being tweeted. So had to be something good was going on after the game. Now, 5-star wide receiver, Caleb Cunningham. That's the big news coming out of this weekend. Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons both put in expert predictions for the 5-star wide receiver who's committed to Alabama to flip to Ole Miss. Now, we're going to talk Caleb Cunningham, but first, I was surprised. Were you surprised to see quarterback Deuce Knight on campus this weekend?
Yeah, I'd heard some rumblings, like late Thursday into Friday. It was kind of one of those, hey, we expect him to come, but we'll see if he shows. And then I'm making my way around the field in pregame. And look, I'm having to dodge NFL scouts left and right. I'm trying not to run into guys from the Jets and the Patriots and the 49ers. And then I see Caleb, and then Deuce is right there with him. So I was able to obviously confirm he was in the building. But yeah, it was a little bit shocking. He's been pretty quiet since flipping to Auburn, and Auburn's done a really nice job holding on to that recruitment despite a lot of struggles this year on the field. But look, we always say follow the visits, and for him to show up and be with Caleb Cunningham and then Ole Miss commit Shakai Mills-Knight, LaDarian Clardy was here. They were both telling me that they're working both of those two guys hard. And yeah, I mean, it's huge for Ole Miss because, again, not only getting him on campus, and Josh, I know a lot of times recruits don't really make decisions off wins and losses, but it's hard to be in that atmosphere and see that kind of game and to be honest, that kind of dominant performance and to not be a little affected.
No, I agree with you. I don't think a recruit attending a game and maybe that team loses, I don't think that's going to make or break his recruitment. But a game like this, to be able to witness that and the excitement, you can't communicate that in a recruiting phone call. Like, these are things that you can only do on campus and experience. So Deuce Knight, though, moving forward, do you think? Because when Deuce Knight flipped from Notre Dame to Auburn, I mean, I know Ole Miss was in the background. We would always mention the Rebels in some form or fashion, but they weren't really involved when he flipped to Auburn. So, is Ole Miss involved now? Can we say that Ole Miss is recruiting Deuce Knight, and the next 3 weeks could get crazy?
Yeah, Ole Miss was always recruiting him. I mean, that like you said, Ole Miss was always mentioned. They were always in the picture. Deuce always talked about Ole Miss. Maybe flipping it around on you here. Ole Miss fans saw what Austin Simmons can do, so maybe it's not as pressing of a need.
I know.
That that was always something that was a real interesting, kind of asterisk to the conversation with recruiting a quarterback in 2025, because you have Austin Simmons, you have Walker Howard, and then they really like AJ Maddox, the guy they signed last year. It's not a super pressing need for Ole Miss, and I don't think this staff has always been pretty cool and laid back when it comes to recruiting. They're not going to push guys to, hey, we need to know. They're not going to give an ultimatum or a deadline for guys to let them know. They're always just going to tell them, like, hey, take your time, talk to your family, talk to your coaches, talk to us, come see a game. But yeah, for sure, Ole Miss will be involved moving forward. They're still going to recruit him. They like him as a prospect, obviously. And what's not to like? He's a super talented kid. We saw what he did at the Elite 11 finals. I got to see him at OT7 finals. The dude's electric. And look, you could also flip it the other way and say, well, they got plenty of depth. Well, just bring him in, bring him up to speed, get him in the weight room, learn the playbook, all of that. So, I think Ole Miss is absolutely going to be involved moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. When I was watching that Austin Simmons drive, I was like, oh, this might have just locked it up for Auburn, because there was, in so much of Deuce Knight's recruitment, we talked about how playing time was so important to him. And one of the reasons why, he went to, I think, 4 Auburn home games where they lost and they didn't really play well at quarterback, but he still flipped to them, but because he must be looking at the ability to come in and play right away. And when Austin Simmons leads that drive in the first quarter and he looked great. I know, just coming off the bench, small sample size, all that kind of thing. But, if you're Deuce Knight, you recognize that. So we'll see what happens with Deuce Knight. But I agree with you. I think that maybe, just maybe, he viewed that differently than a lot of other recruits. We know wide receiver Caleb Cunningham was there. He's committed to Alabama, but he's from the state of Mississippi. Another one that when he committed to Alabama, all the experts, Chad Simmons, Steve Wiltfong, they all told me, Josh, he's solid to Alabama, but in the end, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, they're going to make a run. We're going to be talking about them. And here we are, less than a month from signing day. And like clockwork, Caleb Cunningham is now trending to Ole Miss. What happened at the game, and has this been maybe a little under the radar recruiting going on leading up to this? What's going on between Caleb Cunningham and Ole Miss?
Yeah, I've been kind of on the fence with possibly entering a flip prediction. I thought, man, it's a little too early. I'm going to talk to him after the weekend. We'll see what happens. But yeah, buzzing in the pregame, I went up and just kind of, asked him how he was doing, getting ready for the playoffs next week. And then, he just immediately started talking about the game, talking about how excited he was to see Ole Miss in this atmosphere and the environment. He was there with all the other guys. He was really excited to be there and to be around, not only Ole Miss commits and guys that he's gotten to know throughout the process, but I think he was just excited to be back at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. You talk about a perfect weekend. Just so happened that Caleb Cunningham is in town, and then you've got DK Metcalf's in town. Dante Moncrief's in town. Cody Core, former Ole Miss wide receiver, was in town. They were all on the sidelines. Just that right there, and seeing, that tangible, these are guys that played in the NFL. These are guys that were here. And, especially with Metcalf and Moncrief, they're both from Mississippi. I think that's been big for Caleb, that I think he was always open to going anywhere. He was always open to building relationships with anyone. He was never going to pigeonhole himself to being a, quote, Mississippi kid.
Right.
I think that's starting to pull on him a little bit, and just continuing that legacy of Mississippi wide receivers. I think that's wearing on him a little bit. And I think that's something that he could potentially grab hold of and take pride in. And, hey, I want to be the next DK Metcalf or the next A.J. Brown or Dante Moncrief or,
Yeah.
he wants to be the guy that's next in line from the state to play in college, play at a high level, and then get to the NFL. And then I think just the offense. I mean, Lane Kiffin's has not stopped recruiting him. The entire staff is recruiting him at this point. And just I thought last night was a pretty good mix of the environment, just the vibes, all the players with him, but then also the offense, really got things going. Wasn't 515 yards like it was against Arkansas, but Jackson Dart and the wide receivers had a good night. And I mean, I don't think there was. If Ole Miss had to plan that kind of unofficial visit, I don't think it could have been planned any better.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of recruits early in the cycle say, I want to go play, recruits in Georgia want to go play for USC, and recruits in Florida want to go play for Oregon. And as we get closer to signing day, the realization of, hey, I'm going to really go across the country and not be near my family starts to set in. And those same recruits start to wonder and start to think, well, maybe those same things that I wanted to do across the country, I could do right here at home. And a game like this, though, kind of brings it all together, because you're right. Like if this game doesn't happen the way that it did, you wonder, if the scores flip-flopped and Ole Miss gets run out of the building by Georgia, then you wonder if they see it the same way, but the opportunity's there. So let's stay on this exciting topic of the wide receiver board, because I saw, and you guys have a ton of stuff at OM Spirit on Xavier Hardy, Cameron Sparks, some of these 2026 guys, but you reported something that really got me going yesterday, and that's a wide receiver transfer, Jonte Cook. You are reporting that Ole Miss is already in contact with Jonte Cook, who announced he's a former 5-star, that announced he's leaving Texas. It looks like it's due to some playing time or something like that. But Ole Miss has a connection here with Cook. I mean, this isn't just a cold call.
Yeah. Yeah, he took an OV the summer before, he ended up ultimately signing with Texas. He's got a really good relationship with Lane Kiffin. He, raved about the OV. He actually had, basically a documentary crew with him that filmed the entire visit. So that's big. He's got the connection with Lane Kiffin. They talk a lot about, hey, you could come here and be, the next Elijah Moore, play in the slot, be a playmaker. We'll get you the football. I talked to a couple people in Texas that are close to that recruitment and just work around the University of Texas. And I was told Ole Miss and I was told Oregon early.
Okay.
Oregon, obviously they got Corey Moore. Maybe there's a little bit of a connection there, maybe a little bit recruiting there. But I think that Jonte Cook knows not only will Lane Kiffin get him the football, but he knows that he could be a potential focal point of the offense in 2025 and beyond. I think that's big for him. He's already been in college. He's trying to go somewhere to maximize his exposure and maximize his talent, and I think that that's big for Ole Miss and its chances to potentially get Jonte Cook. So he's not officially in the portal yet, but obviously leaving Texas. But I think that once that's official and he really starts looking around, that things are going to ramp up for Ole Miss and Oregon, and we'll see who else jumps in the mix.
Yeah, and he's just the first big name that we know Ole Miss will be in on. So it was a historic win for Ole Miss, 28-10. It was Lane Kiffin's biggest win as a Rebel. So as we enter into Lane Kiffin time, it's flip season. Is there any other names that you think Ole Miss fans should be watching in terms of names that Ole Miss could circle back on? Like, I know that you expected or was hearing that A.K. Deer was going to make it in. A.K. Deer did not make it in. But are there any other names that Ole Miss fans should just be weary of as we hit closer to signing day?
I think the main ones, obviously, we talked about Caleb Cunningham. I think that's obviously the big one, the number one target on the board. I think Ole Miss has a really, really good shot at getting that one done. A couple other ones, Auburn commit Dante Core. He took an OV way back in the summer, really enjoyed it, really liked it, and then ended up committing to Auburn. He was in town, and I think that Ole Miss is trending in that direction there as well. And then a guy that I was talking to this morning, and we were kind of laughing. I told him he snuck into town. Devin Harper, offensive lineman, committed to LSU. I think Ole Miss is very, very, very much in the mix there. And like you said, just it's never wins and losses, but when you're on a visit and you're in that environment, and then the team you're committed to just so happens to get run out of their own building, just that fresh, right after everything happens, probably has you thinking a little bit. But I think Ole Miss is in a really good spot for both Devin Harper and Dante Core. I know Pete Golding was tweeting out a shark emoji.
Yeah.
Could be Dante Core, but there were several guys on campus last night. I mean, look, I saw a graphic that Ole Miss is 2-0 when squirrels are on the field. As got another one over here that's probably trying to get in the video, but yeah, it was a wild night. Again, I don't think Ole Miss could have planned a better visit weekend for a lot of these top guys.
No, and you're right. You said it. It doesn't make or break if they win or lose, but when they win, it can take it to the next level. I'm about to go talk LSU recruiting after this segment, and it's kind of what you're saying. Ole Miss and LSU both pushed all their chips into the middle, and LSU brings in Bryce Underwood, DJ Pickett, DeCorian Moore, Jakeem Stewart, Anquan Fagans, and they lose. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that they're out of it for all those guys, but had they won that game, now I haven't talked to Shea Dixon yet, but I guarantee we'd be having a different conversation about DeCorian Moore, about Jakeem Stewart. So we're going to go talk LSU. Yep. I'm sure they had a great weekend, but not as great as Ole Miss's weekend. Thank you, Zach Berry from OM Spirit. You guys have been killing it all weekend. Go check them out. And Ole Miss fans, talk to us. Comment section below. How we feeling about Caleb Cunningham? How are we feeling about Deuce Knight? What do you think? Does Ole Miss even need him? Let us know. Comment section below.